Okay. Oh,
Oh,
very official.
wow. So we're recording with a different setup today because we're not face to face.
Yes. So the audio should sound better? Question mark.
Hopefully.
And just hands up in the air first. This is the second attempt of trying to record. We had a frustrating experience when we tried to record this second episode because my internet is dog, like
Yeah.
absolutely useless.
It's bad. Hopefully, we should be able to get through it and our microphones won't sound too weird. I have no idea what mine sounds like, so this is a bit of a gamble.
On my end, it sounds okay so far. So
You sound fine on
hopefully-
my end.
perfect. And remember, listener, if it sounds wrong on your end, that's your fault.
Yeah, that is your fault. I do wonder. I guess we probably don't want to risk the lag, but it would be best if we could see each other's faces.
Yeah. Let's give that a crack. Why not?
And now, fuck. How do we? Oh, camera unavailable. Never mind.
Have we scrapped this? Have we
Never mind.
The cameras?
I literally don't have the option to do it, so doesn't matter.
Well, next time at yours, I will drop off a camera for you. We can do it that
Excellent.
way.
Right. So where were we last time, Chris?
So we had just left off, if I'm correct, with you guys meeting the dwarfs.
Yes.
And you effectively, to give a 3-minute summary of the events that immediately transpired beforehand, you guys have been given a quest by the leader of the Penya here, which are these magical wizards, a little bit like the Aes Sedai in the Wheel of Time, that are kind of there as a kind of guardians of the realm against the forces of the Dark One. And
Yes.
you were given this mission to investigate this horde that was rising and was threatening this region of Nova Gorsk, which is the state that is just north of the Scar and the Green Mountain Vale. Hopefully, we should have some images and some maps so you can orientate yourself. And after going there, you had arrived at these outskirts and these smaller towns, and then immediately marched for this bridge and this keep to investigate, finding remnants of this dark band. You then had a skirmish and then pushed on and then convinced this smaller town of Drellin's Ferry to kind of retreat. And then, as they retreated, you guys had the option of deciding to either go up the Elseer River towards Brindle, or to take your chances on the road and try and go on foot. And I believe you guys decided to go on the boats.
We chose to go on the boats because we figured it was going to be a quicker journey and we would be able to evacuate the towns alongside the river as we went along.
Yeah, didn't account for roaming dwarves.
No, we didn't. And the dwarves were charming. We didn't really get to know the dwarves all that well. And something that's really sort of stuck in my mind, a question I've actually written down is, for you, Chris, what did the dwarves think about our party?
So other members in the party left kind of stronger imprints on the dwarves than others. I think probably Gronk had the biggest impact on them, largely because Gronk was kind of the one interacting with them the most.
Yeah, and he's a larger-than-life character in more ways than one.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just naturally, because they're dwarves, they distrust humans. And because Gronk wasn't a human, it was almost like this guy's good in our books.
Yeah.
He's past the height requirement to be offensive to us, but he's
You
then
see,
gone
there's like
past
a
that.
middle ground that's offensive, but if you're short or if you're tall, you're fine.
Exactly. But no, they got on quite well with him. I think they liked Blum, and I don't think they really interacted with Lorena at all.
Oh,
Vexen at this point was comatose, so
that's right.
strike him out.
Yeah.
And Holger was kind of, well, we'll get on to the incident involving Holger and the dwarves that happens a bit later. But
Oh dear.
Holger left an impression in one way, and it wasn't a very positive or flattering one.
No, Holger
Um,
had a bit of an arc on this expedition, didn't he? I mean, Holger had the unveiling of new powers. He had sort of this devastating new combat effectiveness. And I think it somewhat changed his sort of approach and perspective. Not majorly, but subtly. It sort of, he went from a person in the world who was sort of affected by the world to an affecting force. Like he was now in control, mostly for worse, of his own destiny.
yeah, he really became. I hesitate to say a hero, but a larger than life figure at this point.
Yeah.
He was a far stone's throw from the stone throwing, tree climbing hero that had begun the quest and had now kind of evolved into late game Holger.
Yes.
Yeah, but either way, let's not digress too much. The party meet these dwarves, and the dwarves have a proposition or a quest for them. Firstly, the dwarves offer their help in getting the party to Brindle. The party are slowly traveling up this river. They don't really have enough members to fully man the boat, and the dwarven warband, about 20 or so, offer their services in just rowing the boat in exchange for just then taking them to Brindle.
That's right.
And it was during this that they revealed to you their real kind of purpose of being outside of their home, because in my world, dwarves kind of live mostly insular lives on Restria proper, at least. They either have kind of reclusive mountain hole cities where they kind of will dig into mountains and kind of build these ornate multi-leveled cities, or they will be deep underground in mines, and they have their own kind of system of transport and roads, and they're very rarely seen on the kind of overworld, except when they have things to do. In this instance, it was that they were looking to reclaim a dwarven settlement, which was in the region called Rest. Can you remember anything, Nick, that kind of took your interest from that?
The inspiration for the dwarves, I thought, tell me if I'm off base here, but I thought it was clear that these were very, heavily inspired by The Hobbit, the dwarves from The Hobbit. They were on a journey to reclaim a lost home for the dwarves, part of an insular race that have come out and sought help amongst the other folks of the realms. I've always loved dwarves. Dwarves are just like so appealing. They're the sort of epitome of I'm doing my own thing, and what you're doing either bothers me and I won't talk about it until I punch you, or it doesn't bother me at all and I'll just get on. These dwarves, I think, were more of the second, because we had, as much tactical information and sort of conversation with them that we needed, but that we didn't really get to know them because they were incredibly practical people. They didn't really need us to sort of corral them or tell them what to do. This was their field of expertise. So when we got on the boat, it was mostly the players interacting with each other, from what I remember, and a series of perception checks. One of which was intensely failed by the man that we have already spoken about, the myth, the legend, Holger.
Mm-hmm. And this was actually after, I believe, you guys had reached Brindle and been convinced by these dwarves that, it might be fortuitous to come back together as a group and try and attack this settlement, because you'd heard rumors that apparently people from this horde, from this Dark One's army, had come and basically put a camp on top of this settlement. Now, this is, I guess, a little glimpse as well. This arc was pretty close to, if not like straight up, mostly just the Red Hand of Doom adaptation for like 5th edition. So I'd taken it, I changed the names of some things. I'd reskinned the villains and the NPCs and
forgive me,
like
I don't know the Red Hand of Doom. You're gonna have to tell me where does that come from?
So it is from WotC. They had, I think it was a 2nd edition, or it was either 2nd or 3rd edition module, and it was all about this kind of like this hobgoblin horde that was ravaging this land, and then kind of leads to this climactic battle at this city. And so what I did is I basically looked at it, I was like, you know what, I can fit this in, not as the kind of end game, but as the middle game of this campaign.
Yes, as a sort of staging piece for our story to continue into.
Exactly, and I liked doing it, especially considering the fact that the kind of one of my main characters, which was Thexan, who I'd kind of built this. He was getting a lot of visions from the Dark One, as well as poor Krem, and Thexan had to kind of leave. So I was like, you know what, this is a great opportunity to send him north, reskin the story a bit, and allow the pace to feel kind of constant, and to trust that I'm not taking it too far, and it also means that you guys can hop back in and hop out if you need to.
Yeah.
But Red Hand of Doom, if anyone wants to run it, would recommend it. It's really good fun. But what I like to do, and what I did in this, was I added things on top of it. So, for instance, these dwarves, they weren't in the Red Hand of Doom. Got inspired, like you said, from The Hobbit. I was like, I'm gonna stick in a small little band of dwarves that have a reason, so that way I could scale up, the amount of creatures that were in the in Rest itself.
Yeah.
And so, kind of pivoting now back, to the original point, which was this perception check by Hylda. You'd gone to Brindle, agreed to help the dwarves, and then come back up through the river to Lake Rest, and were approaching the kind of the entranceway to the city. And I think I'll leave it to you there to explain a little bit about what you guys decided then to do as you sailed up.
We sailed. We saw the ruins poking out of the lake, and we could tell that there were built battlements. And because there was no cover, we were worried that we might get swamped by arrows, magic, ranged weaponry, and we might take a serious battering before we actually got to the central fortress in the lake with, our one rickety boat. So what we decided to do was lay low at the edge, out of their range, and ideally out of their line of sight, and wait for a time of day where the shadows were long. We decided to settle on the early morning, so that as the fights progressed, we wouldn't lose any, light, so that we wouldn't be at disadvantage. However, in waiting for this time of day to attack, we had to set watches to make sure that no parties from the fort were going to come ambush us.
Mhm.
And one of the people on watch was Holger. And during this
Yeah.
time, he decided that he needed to go take a, nature called. So he stood over the boat and streamed into the waters below. And this was the perception check failure when a creature lunged out of the water and took a nasty bite out of a place that, ooh, you don't want a bite taken out of. Oh dear.
Let's just say Hilda lost a finger.
He lost a limb,
Yeah.
a valued treasure.
And it was in this fight that you guys were attacked by a hungry glass gator, which is a horrifying looking creature. I mean, I'll pull up the photo on the screen now. It is grotesque. It's this kind of semi-translucent gator scorpion centipede thing.
Yeah, it's really horrible. It's like the sort of glass frog if it came out of hell and was made out of nightmares.
Yeah, like it was just one of those creatures, because I was thumbing through the Kobold Press, one of their books of kind of 5e adapted monsters, and I was looking through and I was like, you know what, let's think about what I can do to add around this place to make it a bit more spooky, a bit more dangerous. And I found this and I was like, that's creepy, that's disturbing. And so I put it around, and I didn't expect Hilda to, decide that he was going to go fishing, using himself as bait. But he did it, and a short but hilarious fight ensued.
I mean, the gators attacked the boat and they rocked it, and we had several of our dwarven allies, the people that we would be relying on, not only to help us secure rest, but also who would pay us when we finished. And they were getting minced by these gators. So it was, it was a bit of a race to get them away. And they were invisible in the water completely. We couldn't use detect magic because it's natural camouflage. So it was really a race to sort of either scare them away or kill them all. And we had no idea how many there really were because we couldn't see how many were in the water.
Yeah, especially as this was like during the night watch. You were just there screaming into the dark, trying not to make as much noise as you could, while you were, maybe 500 meters away from this fortress that you were planning to attack.
Yeah. I mean, they heard us. They must have.
Yeah, they did. And that kind of led into the next day, after a rather eventful night.
We still did get a long rest. I think we would have waited another day if we hadn't.
Yeah. I think everyone had got just enough time to kind of recover. Wink, wink. But this then led to the attack and the assault on Rest. And I'll pull up an image on screen as well of the map that I drew of Rest. And the way that I kind of reflavored it was that it was a settlement, a human settlement that was placed on top of a dwarvish settlement that had all been flooded by this lake. And so these kind of hordes, the forces of the Dark One, had kind of arrived on the scene of this kind of abandoned ruin and had immediately gone to work slowly kind of connecting them together with wooden walkways and scaffolding and palisades, but all in a kind of a shoddy hodgepodge way. And so you guys were kind of there scouting in the morning, attacking this, what looks a little bit like an octopus that is holding apples.
Yeah.
I mean, what was your thought approaching this kind of fortress?
My thought was, it would be almost impossible to approach it completely unseen. But I think the hope was that we, because of the size of our vessel and the fact that it was alone, we conveyed a sense that we were enough of a threat to warrant a small party, but not big enough to get the whole group in. Because that way, people in the rest of the camp would be expecting a fight. So, they might not immediately run and gather reinforcements. Or they treated it like a scouting vessel, and so they kept their posts in the other places. What we really didn't want is for the whole host to immediately mob us. And in that regard, I think we succeeded.
Yeah, you were pretty lucky. Despite the noise earlier in the night, come like the morning, you had rolled pretty luckily, I think, in your stealth checks, and I think also Lorena helped you guys when she cast. It was either control water or a wind spell. I think she was a storm cleric, so she could control the wind, and she helped kind of increase the speed of the boat. So not only were you kind of catching them by surprise, you were going way quicker than they thought you would approach.
Yeah.
And so when you hit the ground and landed, all these dwarfs jumped off. You have Gronk going forward, Holger. You guys come into this, I think it was probably about 40 block of just armed to the teeth hobgoblins. Do you remember much of that fight?
I remember that was when I think I first saw Holger unveil his enormous wings. I remember Blum standing on next to the mast on the boat taking pot shots. I remember Gronk smiting into the shield wall and turning people into dust. And I think the people that had the most impact were the primary spellcasters who did another, massive AoE Geneva Convention breaching spell that just decimated an archer tower.
Yeah, there was I think it was the exploding earth or something like that spell. I'm awful with spell names, but Lorena basically casts this spell and blows up a section of this tower, and the whole thing just collapses, killing I think like 30 or 40 hobgoblins that were either like on the top of it or were moving down to kind of support the rest of the group. And I think there was a moonbeam incident with Gronk, and I didn't realize how much damage moonbeam did until I had a literal room full of hobgoblins. Gronk walks in, moonbeams them, they're all dead.
Yeah,
and
it's pretty brutal.
Honestly, I feel like this is the beginning of the legend of Gronk, because from this kind of this small Gronk very quickly becomes just a monster. His power is just insane, and he goes off the rails a bit. Admittedly, I messed up as a DM balancing, but players' decisions always come back to bite. So Gronk kind of balanced himself out later on. But regardless, you guys were charging through. You lay waste to these hobgoblins, going basically along the walkways, breaking through, getting rid of the remaining groups, kind of catching them off. And I think a big contingent of them then fled and moved away off of the remains of rest. And you guys had kind of reclaimed it with the help of the dwarfs.
Yes.
And it was, I think, at this point that you guys arrived in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, not thriving, sadly. Destitute, but still recognizable by the old structures. There wasn't much to loot. But that was where we set up camp. And I don't remember much of what happened. I don't think we had too many sort of interactions with each other in the marketplace. But that was where we found the trapdoors to go deeper into the structure.
Yes, and that kind of brought you down into the dwarven part of the settlement. You guys rested a night and then proceeded to go down. And this is when, I guess, part of the story and the history of this dwarvish settlement kind of appeared and revealed itself to you. So as you kind of enter, you realize you're in this quite gigantic dwarvish settlement, with very ostentatious design and architecture, but it's all incredibly quiet. It's all clearly abandoned, but there doesn't seem to be much sign of a struggle, at least on the kind of civilian side of it. You then arrive at this large throne room, which again is empty, and then on the side of the throne room are these massive, I think 20 foot by 20 foot tall, like stone granite doors with thick bands of chains tied around them. And one of them has been flung open, and you hear things coming from inside that room. You can hear chanting. And what did you think as you approached that?
Well, I can tell you exactly because I have found the memes that we posted. So I think the first one we have, I'll actually post these three together. So these were the three that accompanied us. Oh, there we go. These were the ones that accompanied us as we started the rest dungeon. And they mostly involve us attempting to run away at the first chance. Because Blum is a natural coward. It's a survival instinct that has served him very well. And so that was his first reaction. Of course, we had other people who had different instincts. Krem, naturally curious and suicidal, pushed the magically appearing button. And everyone else wanted to push super hard into this really abyssal, horrible, dank place. Yeah, I can't remember. Were there any actual enemies that we fought until we got to the tombs?
So there wasn't any encounters with enemies in between the kind of marketplace and the tombs. You kind of had come down. Oh, actually, no. Now that I think about it, there was a small contingent of hobgoblins who were guarding a camp in the caverns,
Yes.
right on the entranceway to the settlement itself. And I mean, you dispatched them pretty quickly, right?
I mean, now tell me if I'm getting it wrong, but that was where we first met the axe wielding 9 foot tall sort of villain who became a bit of we saw him again a few times, but that was where we first encountered him.
Yes, that was as you guys kind of, I think it was actually as you guys entered the throne room.
Yeah.
And you guys are making this noise. You hear chanting coming from this kind of one of these doors that has been kind of forced open, and a figure comes out. And I'll pull up an image on screen again to just show you what he looked like. And he was this axe wielding 7 foot tall looking human, but he had kind of immense bulk for his just for his frame. He was about 7 foot tall, and he was wielding two great axes as though they were like hand axes.
Yeah, strong guy, nearly killed a few of us within a few hits. We had quite a few downs, and as he had leeching. He was healing as he sort of cut us open, which was pretty brutal. And in the end, we weren't able to stop his. I mean, we got a good few shots on his mage. So his party was made up of a few minions, him as the commander, and then there was a mage conducting a ritual amongst a pile. I say pile, more like a small mountain of dwarven bones. And we attempted to stop it, but we weren't able to get there in time. And out of that pile of bones came, I think it's fair to say, the proper BBEG of that campaign.
Yeah, the kind of, while the Dark One was like the the master of the chessboard, this was the guy that you really were kind of butting heads with. His commander actually on the ground, and he was this uh, ancient elf, uh, who, I mean, I think his name was Hurgurth Ilgodin, which I can't
We
remember
never.
exactly.
I just realized we never ever learned his name. We
Yeah,
never
yeah,
even
this is.
asked. We never even learnt it. We just called him
Okay.
the blue guy or the elf the whole time.
Yeah,
Even at the end.
and this is the thing. He had a spear, and the spear glowed blue. So you guys just referred to him as the blue spear, uh, the entire campaign,
Yeah.
or the elf. And um, I mean, he came back. He had a thirst for vengeance, but he returned in a weakened state. He had been kind of locked away in this city, by this ancient dwarvish nation, basically giving up their entire lives to seal him away, um, and these guys would just let him free, and you guys were just kind of there watching. As he escaped.
Now, if
And there
we
was
had
a
managed
fight,
to
right?
stop it, what, as in, you let me behind the DM screen a bit. So,
Yeah.
was that inevitable, or could we have actually stopped it? And how would that have changed things?
So the thing was, he was in a weakened state. So if you had managed to kind of down him and kind of forced him back into those chains in this kind of apparatus that was there, you would have been able to stop them and kind of uh, prevent him from escaping or kind of wreaking havoc. And honestly, I think that probably would have changed, uh, maybe even massive events in the campaign. I think that what happens later at the tomb of Huron Fairhair probably wouldn't have been as pressing, or that wouldn't have been the site of the kind of final confrontation.
Mm.
I think you probably would have uh, had it more aimed towards a showdown at the Scar itself, at this abandoned elvish city.
Wow. So
Volley
we
30.
might not even have, left Restria if that had been a victory for us.
Yes, yeah. I think what we would have probably done is used like a waygate or a teleportation way of getting you to the tomb of Huron Fairhair. Had you go in, kind of secure the artifact, and then gone back immediately to the Scar.
Wow.
To have this kind of final showdown.
Damn. Yeah, so the campaign could have been much shorter.
Yes, yeah, that would have been like I think that probably would have been like the big turning point. And again, like his intent in that fight was to get away. And
I mean, it shows, because the moment he was free, there was not really a lot of fighting. He maybe sort of threw maybe one or two hits, but he mostly just ran for the teleport somewhere deeper in the sort of halls of the old city.
Yeah. And while he was running, you guys were fighting Bane. And I think this was your first time experiencing kind of what Bane was about. He was a kind of strong brute whose wounds seemed to kind of heal unnaturally as he did damage.
Yeah. And he wore a jester's outfit, didn't he?
Yes.
Harlequin clothes. And it's now coming to me that he was essentially a buff Galai, which is a horrifying thought.
He was buff Galai with better hair.
Yeah, better hair, buff Galai.
Yeah, and we'll put a picture in here of Galai, who's a character in campaign 2.
So sorry. We love you, Galai. Don't take it personally.
Yeah.
We know you're listening.
Galai, James, we love you. Galai, we don't love Galai.
Oh, it's so harsh. To each their own. I liked Galai. I think I would have really enjoyed going to a circus in the fantasy realm and seeing things go desperately wrong. But to each their own. I mean, our party was kind of a circus at that point anyway. We had, most of the people dying on the floor of an abandoned tomb. We had lots of our dwarves dead, and then we had, we had Yolder had his new powers. Krem did he have his coin back at that point?
Oh no, Krem didn't have his coin back.
Yeah, so he wasn't yet into withdrawals. He was, getting healthier. But Lorena was in full sort of I don't know where I am, but I must kill mode.
Oh yeah, it was a situation where I think in that fight, Lorena. This is I think when Lorena first kind of got her reputation as a effective killer, but a ineffective aimer. Is that the best way of putting it?
Yes.
Yeah. There was a fondness to AoE spells, and they were used very willingly, but they often hit party members.
Yeah.
And I think there was a particularly memorable moment in this fight where I believe was it Blum that was hit by a lightning bolt?
That sounds about right. I have been the butt of collateral damage almost every time, and if it's not me, it's usually Felix.
So I don't know if it was just Blum, but I think there was a situation genuinely where, for whatever reason, Lorena was kind of way back in the hall, trying to keep her distance from this axe wielding maniac, and she casts a lightning bolt, and it hits Blum, and then it hits the guy. And then it hits Grump.
Yes, it keeps going through, and it's like 3 of our friends.
And don't get me wrong, it did so much damage.
Yeah.
But it did damage to everyone.
It was pretty brutal. God. I mean, but I think, we were already, I say we, me and the sort of saner members of the party were already fairly suspicious of magic because I'd inherited that from Texan and from Jonah. Like, it's this sort of the people in that family, they don't like magic. They treat it with a sort of fear and reverence that you'd treat a sort of a curse with, and that just made it 10 times worse, getting absolutely nuked by his teammates, given that something similar had happened back at the bridge and sort of during the dragon fight he died. I think the one restoring sort of part of that would be Krem when he brought him back to life. But otherwise, magic was a big no-no after that fight.
Yeah, and it was especially taboo among kind of the nation where you guys grew up in, like the Racian kingdom. That's spelled Rhasia. I know that I think in the last episode we we both kind of slipped into calling it the Restrian kingdom.
Well, I knew, but I didn't want to bring it up.
Yeah. You saved my fragile ego.
Yeah.
By maintaining silence. But in that kind of culture, it was magic was taboo. That this was a stage or a point in time where, because the Dark One was very real, and because the Empire had just pretty much fallen, or at least capitulated, mages weren't trusted. They were seen as a kind of a portent of doom. Whenever they were kind of the focus of the Dark One quickly followed.
Yeah.
And so, that suspicion was always pretty prevalent, I guess, in your guys' growing up, even more so with someone like Jonah, who had such an innate distrust.
What we do need to talk about, perhaps maybe we can save it to a later segment, but I feel like we need to sort of address what was Jonah doing whilst the rest of the party was away. Yeah,
well, while this was all happening, I think maybe we'll just quickly finish the rest of this fight.
Yeah.
This fight happens, it gets to a stalemate, and I think eventually the party, barely holding on, is able to defeat Bane. And as they do, something weird happens. His body disappears, and all that's left are 2 axes and a mask.
Yeah.
And the axes then fade, and all that's left is a mask. I think you guys just kind of left the mask.
Well, we didn't want to touch it in case it was cursed.
Yeah, being
which I mean, was it cursed?
It wasn't cursed, but there was actually the idea was behind it, and behind all of these kind of lieutenants of the Dark One's army, is that as the Dark One had kind of gained power by pretty much stun locking all of these gods in this kind of explosion that he had caused at the end of this great empire, they were basically siphoning power away from these gods that were in stasis through the use of these masks. So all of the lieutenants were nicknamed after gods that exist in the world. So
I see. Bane, so they were like siphons for divine power.
Yes. And so that's what gave them really like insane artifacts and unique physical abilities.
So so they were tied down. Was it only through the masks, or were the other, like the axes, were they also part of it?
So the axes were part. Yeah, they were part of it. So once you put the mask on, you could wield the axes.
You would just be able to summon them, and they would be part of your power. So I mean, we only saw the sort of avatar, sort of pseudo gods of Bane, and I mean, he was the only name we knew. What other gods did we actually encounter and not know?
Heliod, or Helios, which was like a sun god.
Oh yes.
And Auril, so a god of winter. And then I believe those were the only ones you've encountered directly. There were others acting, and there still are others acting in the world.
Oh.
So yeah, don't want to reveal too much. But yeah, that was kind of how they operated, or how they kind of gained their powers. But regardless, leaving the clearly cursed mask on the floor, you guys then go off and immediately proceed to start looting this this dwarven throne room in front of the dwarves that you've brought with you, who this is their ancestral home.
We're a sensible party. We're making sensible business decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is when the fatal flaw of me as a DM kind of reared its head. And I gave Gronk an item that I really shouldn't have.
Oh, this was the... Oh, dear.
So in my writing, I was like, oh, this ancient dwarf king who was able to seal away this really powerful avatar and kind of lieutenant of the Dark One basically had a bunch of really cool and strong magic items. I think one of which was the Axe of the Dwarvish Lords and kind of like a mithril chain, shirt, and in particular, there was a belt of Storm Giant Strength.
Giant Strength. What strength does that give you?
I believe it's 20-something. It was high.
29. 29 strength.
Yeah.
Which is plus 9 to your raw strength. Which is insane.
Looking back at it, maybe not the wisest decision.
I mean, God, we needed it in the later fights, but Jesus, with that, Gronk was just, I mean, if it gives you the power on par of a Storm Giant, that's like literally the Hulk. Because you can, with that kind of muscle power, you would be able to leap across a city and just cannonball your way through enemies.
Mm-hmm. And he did.
He did, in fact, do that.
Yeah. But this is the thing. I think when I kind of create stories, I want to I don't give out magic items a huge amount, largely because in my world, magic items are pretty rare.
Yeah.
And so when I do give them out, I want them to be meaningful. And in this case, this was meant to be his kind of vestige or mythic artifact that would stick with him throughout the entire campaign.
And in a way, it did.
And it did. It really kind of
I mean,
stuck to it.
you were really. There was a point where I think he had it taken off him, and he pushed back quite aggressively because he
Yeah,
got
yeah,
very attached to that item.
yeah. I feel like he responded similarly to like a meth addict would,
Yes,
when it
yes,
was taken away from them, uh, and yeah. I mean, we'll move to that in a bit, but I think probably at this point that was basically that little section wrapped up. You
yeah.
guys had taken it. That was the main piece of loot that you'd recovered. The dwarven king had kind of sat on the throne and made various pledges. One of which was to name a town district after Gronk,
Yeah, Gronk got all
which
the
was just
glory
kind of
for
like,
our stuff. I mean, most of us didn't
yeah.
mind, but just a sort of observation that the only one really
I think
benefiting there, reputation-wise, was Gronk.
it was a situation where he just asked, and they were like, "Okay," and
Yeah.
yeah,
No one else thought that it would be appropriate to ask, so none of us knew that it was an option.
yeah. Um, but regardless, when this was happening, uh, we then moved to kind of like Jonah's arc, and I did kind of flesh this out quite a bit. I don't think I've ever talked to pretty much anyone about it. Um, when Jonah left the party, uh, Jonah was actually conscripted.
Conscripted now, so you kept track of Jonah's movement, and what I am sort of going to talk about is how Jonah's sort of unsaid backstory, the stuff that never fully took form in words, sort of emerged, and how that might affect what you have sort of where you have placed him on the map. So
Yeah.
Jonah, I think we talked about this, and this was sort of constantly evolving over the campaign. Jonah was originally not magic at all at the very start of the campaign, but that changed. After a certain point, we decided that Jonah was in fact slightly magical, and the reason why he was married, a Penya here had sought him out in order to conceive of a child that was prophesized. Like, there was not a lot of love between Jonah and his wife. Well, I mean, it was one-sided. Hello? Hello?
Hello, can you hear
Oh,
me?
oh, I'm back.
Okay, I think we had a little glitch there.
I think that was
Uh,
me because my bars went grey.
but it's fine. What we'll do is we'll cut that out. Also, my thing made a slight noise, my phone. So I will just cut my audio from that part.
It's
But
fine.
your
We
audio
can
will be
cut it with that wobbly phase, like.
exactly.
Um,
Or just static.
what was the
But
last
anyway,
thing you heard me say?
I heard that you said that you basically from the start of the campaign it evolved, and you were explaining that he was magical.
Yes. So the reason he was Thexan was born was because his mother, a Penya here, had sought Jonah's family line out and had decided, following a sort of prophetic path, that she was going to have the child to sort of and train it in a sort of, not overtly, but certainly protect it in a very sort of rural and isolated place. Thexan was sort of the Anakin Skywalker child of destiny in this sort of scenario. And the reason why is because Jonah's bloodline linked weirdly to the villains. Not in that they were sort of directly connected, but the power was sort of similar. Jonah's line was descended from gods or people that sort of claimed the names of gods. And if I remember correctly, do I still have the notes? It was the god of nature. I think Sylvanus was one of the main ancestors.
Yes.
And the reason why Thexan was manifesting these sort of blood powers, he being a blood hunter, was because he was most potent in this old ancient deific bloodline. And Jonah, in his sort of journey, he knew this secret. He knew the names of the gods, and that made him a target. And whilst he whilst he knew certain things, and he knew that he would have to go to Huron's tomb, he knew that he would have to meet back up with Thexan and all these things. He also didn't have a plan. He didn't have resources, and he was pretty bad at tactical decision making. So that, I think, meant that he ended up in conscription. And what was the sort of place that conscription led him to?
So there was a period, at least in that conscription, where he was kind of hastily recruited into the army of the failing Racian kingdom, and he had fought with them against the Argian principalities and their armies pushing through, and then after a rather disastrous battle, escaped with a pretty well-known commander, and together they had kind of broken off, and you had then gone off and done what you believed you could do after you received news that effectively the Racian kingdom was no more.
Yeah. So because we had both, I had based Jonah a bit off the sort of father in the Wheel of Time of the main character, someone who he was a really great warrior, but he had left it behind in order to raise a child sort of in peace and tranquility. And so this journey that after he sort of leaves, after killing this commander, I suppose would be searching for his old tools, for his weapons. And he did find, the sort of, I guess the equivalent in the Wheel of Time would be the heron-marked blade.
And I think over this period of time, like this is when and how Jonah then reunites with the party far later on in the campaign, in a situation and a state where he was pretty well kitted out.
Yep. High level, high kit, very powerful guy on his own. And I think that he was sort of slowly coming into accepting of magic. And as he did so, like his sort of willpower and his sort of metaphysical presence was bolstering him. Which, he was sort of like on a road to become a Hercules, but Jonah was never going to become that guy. Like his destiny was never to be the sort of the actual hero of the story, because that was Thexan's. Also, we thought maybe it turned out it was actually Blum's. But Blum, of course. So I think I remember Blum, his ancestry. He had the same sort of deific father down in his ancestry, but in his family tree, he was not related to Sylvanus. He was related to the goddess of poisons. I can't remember the name. Let me just search this up. But that explained why he was, a poisoner, sort of an exterminator, a bit shitter than the normal nature goddess sort of bloodline.
Yeah, and I think it was this kind of like the exploring the arcane and and not only the arcane, but the arcane's link to the divine, was kind of a main focal point of both Jonah and Blum's story. Jonah at least acknowledging it and kind of coming to terms with that and what that might mean about him.
Yeah.
And then for Blum, just more embracing it. I think Blum started off as a ranger.
He did.
And then kind of transitioned over the campaign to a different class.
Yeah, it was sort of after... it was actually after this arc, after Brindle. That was his sort of epiphany. Yeah, so his deific sort of matron was Tolona, the goddess of poison, poisonous vegetation, and like lord of the barons of doom and despair. a fairly miserable person, and the mother of all plagues.
And plagues wouldn't be done with Blum.
No, they wouldn't, which is so fitting. So fitting. I cannot believe how well that all lines up. Even months before Blum ended up with encountering a sort of plague-related demon that we will talk about. I think we should move on to the battle. So when we came back with the dwarves, we only came back with a few of them because most of them stayed there.
Yes.
And
I think you guys returned to Brindle with the news that you would have their support when this time came. And as you had destroyed the kind of bridge, you had bought enough time to slow this army down as it slowly marched its way to Brindle. And you guys kind of arrived maybe, I think, 2 days before the settlement was sieged. During that time, I think you guys were given a bit of time to just like prepare yourselves in various different ways.
We were privy to a new party member.
Yes.
So we encountered a turban, sort of adorned, sort of mysterious man played by our friend Dragosh. He only joined us for that sort of, essentially that battle, really. It was only for a few sessions. His character was called Fahad. Do you remember what class Fahad was?
I'm pretty sure he was a rogue.
Okay. Yes.
So
yes, that sounds right. Sort of Prince of Persia-esque, highly dexterous.
Yeah.
And
in the world, again, circle on the map, he came from the kind of more Middle Eastern themed nation of the free city of Yzma. And he had kind of found himself in Brindle and had arrived and was offering his help to you guys as
he was
the battle
sort of. I guess it was more like now I'm on this sinking ship. I guess I'll help. And what a sinking ship it was, because we essentially just prepped with reloading our ammunition and getting our spell slots back, and then the siege started.
And don't you forget, Grant got a very big shield.
That's true. He did get a huge shield, but did he really need it now that he had 29 strength?
Well, the reason why he got the big shield, and this big shield, even with his strength, was that you had heard rumors and you had seen at this Battle of the Bridge that there were dragons accompanying this horde. Yeah. And so you knew that at some point there was a chance a dragon might appear. And so Gronk, being the forward thinker and planner that he is, he's like, dragon, how do I solve this? I'm going to build a massive shield.
Yeah.
And so I think he took maybe the entire iron supply of this small settlement. And by small settlement, I mean a city. And had these smiths working day and night to fashion him a massive shield, about 10 foot tall and like at least 10 foot wide as well, that he would use to some effect in the siege. And I think you also got some particularly strong magic arrows.
I did. I got sort of arrows that were they something like sunlight arrows, akin to they're sort of highly explosive, big radiant damage burst. And we only got a few of them.
Yeah, I think
but they were used to great effect.
Yeah. The kind of the Siege of Brindle begins with this this large army surrounding it, and kind of following how the book does it, they basically split it up into different smaller combats where you guys are given like an objective. And so I kind of broke it down into, I believe, 3 main combats. I had a interaction with like the gates where this horde had like begun to construct siege towers and trebuchets, and you had an opportunity there to kind of like stall them and delay them. And if you completed these non-combat related, but kind of more environmental objectives during these combats, you would effectively have your chance of succeeding in the battle.
And I remember all of our characters standing on Brindle's wall, and the only person properly equipped to actually sort of help at the initial stage was Blum. Or so I thought, because now that Gronk had a strength of 29, he just picked up boulders and threw them with far more effectiveness than the man with an actual ranged weapon.
I think what ended up happening is these trebuchets were firing at the walls. They were hitting the walls, and Gronk was just picking up the boulders and throwing it back at them. And in the meantime, we had like Holger with his he deployed his wings. At this point, Holger had, I think, earlier on in the campaign, slayed an angel or a chained angel of some kind and got his halo, which allowed him to kind of equip wings, a bit like an Asimir. And he was running around, flying around, kind of doing what he could with his swords. You were firing arrows. Lorena was trying to, I guess with the mages, you had a bit more of a situation where they would have to really measure when and where to use their spells.
Yeah, they were our artillery for that fight. I mean, you know, phase 1 was basically just throw as much shit as you can at them. Phase 2 was where things got pretty dicey, because that was the dragon.
Yes, and before I do leave phase 1, there was a minor a secondary objective, and that was that you guys would have to try and destroy some of these siege engines. And so I gave the siege engines.
How much of an objective can that really be? Because how did we actually destroy at the end?
I think you got 1.
Yeah, like,
and there were 6. So
objective, cripple entire army. Well, I guess we'll try.
Well,
we could have, if we'd rolled well, a couple nat 20s from Gronk, and we could have done it.
Exactly. Honestly, I think if Gronk had just tried a bit harder, then maybe you guys win right there.
Fucking Gronk! But what a lazy piece of shit.
But then came this fight with the dragon, and you guys were kind of, I guess, trying to get from one point to another as you were being harassed by hobgoblins. And then midway through this hobgoblin fight comes a large dragon swooping down, just raining down hellfire.
Yeah, I mean, was it... It wasn't an ancient, because we didn't die immediately. Was it an adult dragon?
It was an adult dragon.
Yeah. So tough fight, high CR. Normally we'd be outmatched. At least not without the sort of items that we'd been given.
And as well, this dragon's intent was that it had made a deal effectively with the Dark One and with one of its lieutenants that it would assist and help, but it wasn't going to die here.
Right.
This dragon basically had, rather than having its 4 hit points, was that if you guys did 100 hit points of damage to it, the dragon would just leave. But how much damage it did before that, and how many turns it took for this to happen, well, that was the kind of the objective there.
Yeah. And did we not actually kill it? I can't remember.
No, you didn't kill it. You wounded it. You did a significant. You did significantly more than 100 hit points of damage.
Yeah.
I think you did close to like 200.
I mean, there is a meme of that time of Gronk just walking away from an explosion. Well, I think which really sums up his contribution to that fight. Because he did something like 80 points of damage in smites in like one turn.
Yeah, that was oof.
Crit smite.
To be fair,
pretty brutal.
I think it was Blum that was the main carrier of this fight.
Well, he had the arrows, and I think I also got it took a few times, but he did get a poison on the dragon, which meant that, it was much easier sort of forcing it away after that. But just because we need to finish this arc, and we are running out of time, we need to talk about phase 3.
Yes, phase 3 was the showdown with these gods. In particular, it was a big showdown with Bane and Heliod, who you had not met at this point, but was effectively riding a flying chariot, firing arrows at you from
Yeah.
a distance, while Bane was harassing you on the ground. And this was a close fight. There was a real chance that you guys might not succeed. And I think this is actually when Fahad had helped you with the dragon, and then Dragos wasn't there the next week. So Fahad had kind of was doing other things on the battlefield around.
He'd been like pinned under some rubble. He had to go rescue a child from a burning building. Something had caught his ire, and he could not be there.
Exactly. Or, the dragon had burnt down a building, revealing, money, and he was like looting.
It could have been something good. you don't know if he was just stealing. Besides, there was a lot of opportunity to looting after the city had already been completely turned to rubble, which was the second after.
And from your memory, what do you remember about this kind of big Phase 3 fight?
I remember that the Bane threw the axes. I remember that we took out the chariot before we took out Heliod. And I remember that Gronk pulled a Nat 20 smite and decimated the opponents with divine fire. And it was so extraordinarily, there was one attack that was so devastating that was the point where Blum got the spot of... he essentially converted Blum to a druid. It was such an awe-inspiring moment that Grunk inspired Blum to sort of have faith in that same power source because of its just insane wrath. But at that time, I was under the impression that Gronk was like paladin druid, sort of hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize he was just a paladin.
Oh, he was just straight paladin.
Yeah.
And he was pumping every spell slot that he had into a smite.
Yeah.
And it was actually during this final fight that it looked really, really dicey. You had dealt with Heliod. I believe you, Blum, had basically hit him with an arrow and knocked him off the chariot, and then Holger had come up to him and basically stabbed him while he was on the ground. And killed him. And then this fight with Bane continued. Yeah, and it got very, very dicey. Exactly. Just he's a classic,
thief of every kind. I could have added Godslayer to my name list.
Mm-hmm. You were robbed.
I was robbed, although I think I did that anyway.
And then after this, it was during this moment that the odds looked pretty dire. That Thexon rejoined the party, as he had been kind of reunited or returned from his hiatus, seeking kind of healing for this magical wound that he had received. He was alongside the dwarves that you guys had helped, and had kind of made his way to this kind of fight with Bane at the center of Brindle. And I remember that it got very, very close here. It looked like you guys might not win, largely because the way that Bane worked is that the more damaged he was, the more injured he was, the more he could attack, and the more he could attack, the more he could heal. So he had this situation where if you guys left him on 5 HP, provided he was able to get an attack off, he'd be back up at 60. And this all happens, and this is when I think that meme of Gronk walking away from a explosion happened.
Yeah,
because he hit a nat 20 on him and did something absurd.
He did over 100 hit points, I think, in a single strike.
Yeah, and
because we were doing super crits.
Yes,
full max damage, and then you roll again. So
why not?
It was extraordinarily devastating. I mean, sort of when that was all done, the city was in ruins, and that was when Blum went down, has his epiphany. He prayed to a god for the first time, although it wasn't really prayer. It was more like sort of meditation, because he was going into the sort of druid craft, so it was more like he was connecting with nature rather than like a specific god. And so, like, going by his family heritage, it would be him coming in contact with his true name, because he had a godly name. It was just not a strong one. I think it was Makely or something along those lines, which is one of the gods. It's actually a goddess. And it was a sort of a god of the hunt, which was, a patron of rangers. But that was only the sort of start of his journey. And everyone else had, it was very much in The Hobbit, after the Battle of Five Armies scene in the movies. There's the scene where Bilbo and Gandalf are just sitting on a rock, scarred and beaten, and they're just smoking. And I think that really sums up the post-battle of Brindle.
Yeah. The city was kind of burning around you guys, and you had the sending off, the kind of relaxed, the Hobbit music playing as you relaxed and looked on what you have done and what you'd accomplished, and felt content. There was one thing though, and one incident that happened, and that was, you had basically been, the entire time this siege had been preparing, you'd been planning the defense with the Lord of Brindle, and in this final battle, he had been there with you and given a death blow by Bane, and it was in his kind of dying last moments that he requested you guys hunt down this wounded dragon that had escaped. And I think his request fell entirely on deaf ears.
I don't even remember him saying it. I'll be honest. I wasn't paying attention about that part. I mean, hunt down a dragon. Maybe we talked about it and said, you know what, don't fancy it.
Yeah, well, this was the thing. This is the beauty of it was, right after this, Krem has a vision. And the vision is the Dark One has captured his brother, and is holding him in this kind of ancient elvish city, and is trying to kind of turn and twist him. And so I think with that kind of setting, that what's up next, we could probably come to an end. Yeah, come to an end of that.
Well, I do want to take us down a little trip on Memery Lane, just to re-observe some of the memes that we made. I think this is still in the sort of starting. We didn't really get super good at memes until a little bit later on. Mm-hmm. There was some. Let me just find it about this very moment. So we had a few about the battle. I mean, very long. It was several sessions of like pretty much straight combat. And so we didn't have a huge amount of time for the memes. But we got this one here. Not one of my favorites. A quite sort of humble meme. But that was the post-battle in summation. Bunch of glittering magic item adorned rich people walking around in like a complete wasteland of a city. And leading straight in, that was when I missed a session.
Yes. Yeah.
So Balam had that, and then I was out. I missed a session, I can't remember why, but I couldn't be there. And when I got back, where the fuck were we, Chris?
You guys were in the Scar.
We were in the fucking Scar. We were in the fucking middle of the mountains, in the evil place in the world. Someone had gone out there, and they dragged Blum along. And I guess that's where we'll pick up next time. Yeah. Maybe we can have a chat with Krem about the terrible series of decisions that led us into the heart of the enemy's territory.
Yeah, and thank you again so much for listening, and I hope this was enjoyable.
And thank you preemptively our magnificent listener Seb for who is definitely going to provide us with some notes and minor critique. We promise not to take them too harshly.
Yeah, thank you so much, and we'll see you in the comment section, Seb.
Yeah.
So
Next
care,
time.
everyone.